everyone, and welcome to the Core Review, the show where I take your cores, I review them, and I put them on this handy dandy tier list. Now, without any further ado, let's get into it. So we kick things off with none other than Ace Angel. Now, first impressions, there are some things I will talk about, some logos and whatnot, and some pointers, but let's just get into it with the face morph, shall we? So, immediate thing to note is that this does use the generic face template, face template 1 as we all like to call it, and there is some morphing here. However, the eyes are always going to be a dead giveaway. Now, I don't know if they fixed it to the point where we can morph it just on here. No. I have shown how to sort out that face template issue of not being able to move the eyes on handy dandy template 1, which you can find in the card up there, or I'll leave a link in the description to the short where you can do it. It doesn't work with face textures, but it does work if you're not using a face texture, which I would definitely recommend to anyone who is using generic face template 1. I do think it's fine. I think that there could be a little bit more morphing, but I do like the fact that you've at least made an attempt to get a little bit of morphing out of your core. I do think that works very, very well. And now we get into the gear, and this is where I'm gonna say something. So I think a lot of people know, if you've been around the core circuit before, you'll know that this logo belongs to a very, very well-known core. Someone who has actually gone on to become a professional wrestler in the form of Chris Danger. Now, I will always advocate for not having somebody else's logos on your core because it doesn't feel like it's your design, right? Like you're taking elements from other people and you're making it your own, but you're not changing it, you're just using it, right? So like right now it doesn't feel like, especially with the Bebe on the back, it doesn't feel like this character, this wrestler is trying to be himself, right? Like Ace Angel isn't trying to be the first him, he's trying to be the next Adam Cole or the next Chris Danger. And like, you've got Heaven's Ace there, you've got Fly High there. Me personally, I wouldn't have this many different logos and this many different slogans on a core because, you've only... Your gear sells you, and if you have too many logos and stuff, it's going to be hard to keep track. So I would say you could probably keep the Fly High and the Heaven's Ace, right? Like the Fly High could be on the back of the jacket instead of the Bebe. The Heaven's Ace could just stay there. I think that's a nice logo. Get rid of the Chris Danger logos. Get rid of the Bebe, I would say. Be your own person, right? Don't be the next Chris Danger or the next Adam Cole. Make it the first him. I think the color scheme's nice. Again, it's just nothing super standoutish for me. And I think that if maybe with a little bit more face morphing, a little bit more consideration for the logos, and then if we have a quick little look at the tattoos, that's cool, but I'm not sure if the gym badges work as tattoos. I think you could probably move that tattoo to here, maybe down there, or maybe move that down and then bring that one over to here instead. Maybe change the font of that tattoo in the middle as well, but again, that's just personal preference. I think it would look a lot better if it was a little bit more, if it was more calligraphy than if it was just standard text, right? Like, I think that just works better in tattoo format. But I do think you've got the makings of a decent core here. I just think you need to figure out who you want to be, rather than just trying to be somebody else and using other slogans and logos from other people. So where does Ace Angel place on the tier list? I think it's a solid offering, but nothing super crazy, so I'm going to go ahead and put him in the C tier. The next core up for review is none other than Allison Graves. Now, first impressions, I think the look is solid, but I do have some things that I'm going to bring up, because this definitely feels like it's inspired by one person, and there are some things in the execution that I need to kind of go over. So let's go over it. So first things first, this morph is very different to the face on the actual core. Now, we'll get on to why in a second, because I won't lie, I've had to record this twice. But I think this morph is nice. The eyebrow bleed could be fixed quite easily by just going at it again with the morph. Now, I think the mouth could be tweaked a little bit more, and maybe the nose could be moved just ever so slightly to one side. But apart from that, I think it's a solid morph. It's quite unique, and it's not one I've seen before, so I think it's pretty good. And now we get into the attire and whatnot. So the first thing I noticed was that the morph was different to what this is here. So I wanted to look, and if you notice on face tattoos, that is a Rhea Ripley face texture. Typically when people do this, it's to get like makeup effects and whatnot, because if you blend it in a little bit more, it looks a little bit better. My problem is that Rhea Ripley face doesn't match the face that was morphed onto this. So things kind of lose their impact and things lose their shape. Like, if you notice, this nose now has like weird lines and different coloration on it. Just some things look a little off. And as you can see on the hairline, there's a bit where the black goes through like the scalp and then it just disappears. That could easily be remedied by just adding another face tattoo and just making sure that that covered that spot. And I think it wouldn't look as wild. However, I think that this nose is a big problem, and I think that that is always going to hold this back. So I get the premise, I just don't think the execution is all quite there. And I will say that this definitely gives me Rhea Ripley gear vibes, and because of that, it's going to be very hard to judge like how well this core is. But my thing is that like tattoos bleed a little bit. It's quite like bland on the back. There's just nothing there really. And I think if you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna do tattoos, I really think you either do like one sleeve or like one tattoo, or you go all in. I don't really think there's a middle ground, really. Like, I think that there is if you do it properly. I haven't seen it personally, and hey, if any of you want to go ahead and try it out, let me know and leave it in the comments. Go ahead and just upload it to the hashtag breadstick, and just let me know that you do it, and I'll definitely try and check it out and see how you've handled not having tattoos all over the body, but over certain parts. But I just think that this one just kind of loses a little bit when you look at the back and realize that that is a little bit bland. Also, this like underlayer, I understand what you were trying to do, but it bleeds too much. So even with the full gear on it, it looks fine on entrance, kind of. But if I was to go into in-ring, this is where the problems are going to start emerging, because now, as you can see there, the bleed is quite noticeable, and that's where problems are going to start arising. I think this is a solid attempt at a core, but my problem is that it just doesn't feel special or unique, right? Like, it just feels like trying to be a Rhea Ripley, and I don't want to see another Rhea Ripley. I want to see what you bring to the table. I want to see how a core inspired by a Rhea Ripley comes out, and not just a core that wants to be Rhea Ripley. I think that's a big differentiation, and for that, I'm probably going to give Alison Graves a B tier. I think some of the technical aspects are there, but I think it's a case of doing too much, and it hasn't necessarily worked out in your favor. Next up for review, we have Jordan Garcia. Now, first impressions, there are some good elements to this core. There are some that I'm not the biggest fan of, which we will get into, so let's just get into it. So, as we can see here, it's a case of everyone's favorite generic face template 1. I'm not seeing that much face morphing here. There could have been a little bit, but I'm not seeing it all that much. Maybe there's a little bit in structure instead. It looks like there's been a little bit, but I can't tell, honestly. Like, this is the problem. I think some people will do a little bit, and because they do a little bit, it doesn't reflect well because of things like not being able to morph the eyes. Now, again, like I said, I have been able to find a workaround without face textures, so you can definitely work on that. It might just take you a little bit of trial and error. It's annoying, but unfortunately, we're at a point now where asking for a working 2K game is just a little bit too much. So, yeah, I think the morph is okay, but I'm not really seeing anything that makes it stand outish, and it looks a little bit on the generic template 1 kind of side. But let's get into the attire, shall we? So, first thing I want to do is I want to have a look at the tattoos, because I feel like this is always a good tell of what people are cooking up. So, we do have some custom tattoos, but in-game ones on the right. And this is the problem. I think if you can source outside of the game tattoos for one side, I'm really not a fan of using the in-game ones, just in general. And I think it shows that you can do this, so just do it for the other side. Like, honestly, just do it for the other side. It will make your core look way more unique. Trust me. I feel like this hairstyle, I'm not going to rag on people for hairstyles, because, you know, at the end of the day, unfortunately, there are only so many in this game that look good, so you kind of have to just go with what you're given, and honestly, this is a pretty good one. So I understand that a lot of people use it. Unfortunately, I just can't get behind the fact that it is just, like, I don't know, the generic face just kind of makes everything from, like, it's a struggle to differentiate this, which looks pretty good, with that as well. I think just touching up the morph would be fine, but now we're going to get into the issue where Balor Club logo, Seth Rollins logo, Balor logo, the Logan on there. Yeah, I know it's hard to get rid of that, but like, with a little bit of trial and error, you can make that happen. I like that logo. Is that an in-game one, or is that, I'm not going to rag on you for having in-game logos, but is that in-game, or is that, yeah, it's an in-game logo. That's nice. I like that. That works. That works really well with that. I don't want to see a Balor Club logo on a core, unless it's a Finn Balor core, or if it's someone who's a part of Balor Club. Now, granted, you might be in your universe, but again, like I said, with the guy with the Ricochet shirt, Balor doesn't exist in CEW. So I would never be able to sell that, right? I wouldn't be able to sell a world where I could have that logo and it feasibly makes sense. So that's always going to be a bit of a downgrade for me. I think this core is good. I just wish that there was more to it, right? And I think on that and that alone, I think Jordan Garcia, decent offering, but the morph could be worked on quite a bit. And I think the attire leaves a little bit to the imagination, could have been a little bit fleshed out. So I think C tier is a fair place to put him. Alright, next up for review, we have Amy Lee. Now, first impressions, solid look. There are some things we'll talk about, but let's get into it, shall we? So, as always, we start off with the face morph. Now, this one could be a little bit better, I won't lie. There are some issues where the eyes aren't necessarily lined up perfectly, the eyebrows aren't either, the nose could have been tweaked a little bit, and the mouth could have been tweaked a little bit. I think further away, it's not as bad, but like up close, you can really see it, and it does become a bit of an issue. Like if I look at it from this angle here, you can see where the mouth isn't lined up properly, the nose isn't lined up properly, and the eyes aren't properly. But I think it's a solid texture, and I think if you put a little bit more time into the morph, I do think you could have a really nice and quite unique face morph actually on this core. But let's get into the gear, shall we? So as far as gear goes, I'm pretty certain this is mainly just like a Gigi Dolan gear, which is fine. I think the hairstyle's cool. Let's see if they've done anything to kind of like maybe hide some of those face texture issues here. Not really. I think the eyes have been covered up quite well. I think with the makeup you don't see it as much, but unfortunately there's really not saving the, like, there's not much that's gonna save the nose, the mouth, or the eyebrows. It's kind of difficult because taking off the eyebrows means that you wouldn't be able to have like the blonde eyebrows either, which is a big issue. But then again, if you wanted to go with a blonde core, you could just Photoshop the eyebrows on the texture to make them more blonde. That way then you don't have to worry about using in-game eyebrows. Like I always say, if you have a face texture, I'm going to assume you have some way of editing that face texture to make it work a little bit better if it's not currently already working. I think that this is like a decent look, but it's nothing really standoutish, and I do think that that has been the moral of the story. I do like the fact that there's like that freckled skin kind of deal. Like that's cool, right? That's something unique, but I'm not really seeing a lot. And the one thing that I did have to kind of like judge the core making skills on is unfortunately it's a bit of a mess, I'm not gonna lie. For Amy Lee, I think, like I said, unfortunately, it is a little bit all over the place. The gear is a little bit basic and is just Gigi Dolan's gear, really. And the one thing that was kind of worked on, which is the face texture, unfortunately, is a little bit all over the place. So I think for that reason, I feel like it has to go in a low C tier. I think if you fixed the face texture and maybe experimented a little bit more with gear styles, I think you would have a look that works really well. But I think right now there's still a lot to be desired. Next up for the core review, we have Roach Navarro, and first thoughts, yeah, this is a cool core, I can't lie. We're going to get into this because I feel like this might be a top tier one. I really do. Let's get into it. So first things first, a texture has been used. I don't think there's been much in way of a morph. I feel like I can see some of the eye of the texture on that there. And the mouth could have been morphed a little bit better. But apart from that, I do think it's decent. Here's the thing, right? You've got the base now. So what I would do is I would just go ahead, and even if you just started tweaking it now that you've got it in this state, now you've got it to the point where it's sort of lined up, I would probably redo it again just so you've got the mouth morphed a little bit better. But apart from that, that. I think it's solid. I do think this is going to bring it down ever so slightly, because I mean, like, with all of these added details, it's really hard to tell if that's actually like the default face or not. There's a little bit of bleed on the texture, but like that's not noticeable from far away. I am fighting in your corner right now because I really like the look of this core, I can't lie, but I have to be unbiased. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that's been added. A lot of facial hair work has been done on this, which I can respect. I do this quite a lot as well. And you've got like the scar there to add a little bit of definition. I've noticed you've used some wrinkles and blemishes and whatnot to add more definition to the texture, which is, you know what, hey, this is what I mean by, like, it is the, like, somewhat the generic face template. But, like, with all of these added details, you wouldn't be able to tell, really. And I think that is what takes someone from like, an A tier with a good design to an S tier, is being able to maybe take that generic face template and then moving it up a level by doing stuff that adds detail without necessarily having to use another face template. And I do think that this works really well. Again, there's a little bit of bleed, but I think with, like, the hair and everything else added to it, I don't think that's a big deal. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say that the gear is just pretty much using in-game stuff, right? And I've always said this since day one with the core reviews. I don't care if you use all in-game stuff. I don't care if you use 1,000 custom images. Is that a body texture? Hold on a moment. It is not. Okay, alright. I thought it might have been for a second, but it is not. I do like the tattoo there as well. That's blended in quite nicely. But as I was saying, I don't really care if you use if you use custom gear or not, if you use custom images on your gear or not. I just care about if your gear looks good, and to me, this all works aesthetically, which is really all you need to sell a character. I could see this guy literally being an actual wrestler. And I think sometimes that's really all that matters. I could see this guy being someone that I would see on TV, maybe on like an NXT or something, doing his thing. And I think that's a really, really good sign. So where does Roach Navarro go on the tier list? So at first I said he might have been an A because of the face texture, but then, like, when we looked at it a little bit more and saw the wrinkle and the definition added to it, this is what I mean by just taking a little bit more time in the morph can really escalate. I think the gear's nice. I think it all works together really, really well. And I do like the hair and everything blending together. I'm gonna say a high A tier for Roach Navarro. I'm being picky today. I'm being really, really picky. Where would it go to being an S tier? Maybe making the gear stand out just a little bit more. Not necessarily through custom images, but just making the gear stand out a little bit more. So I think to wrap up this episode, I think I'm going to do something I haven't done before, which I'm going to take a bunch of the cores that are currently on CC under the hashtag breadstick, and I'm going to do a quick fire review. So you're not going to get the whole kit and caboodle like I usually do, but it's going to help cut down the numbers a little bit. I'm not going to do too many, mainly the ones that I can't download for DLC or whatever reasons, my rise or whatever. That way then you still get a chance to get reviewed, just not in the full glory. So let's just get into it. So we have Leo Stark here, and immediately, so I'm going to be looking at my TV for these ones because they're very small on my PC, but immediately I'm thinking this is a cool core. I'm liking the attire, but I do think there's a bit of issues with cutting. It does very much look like the default face template, but it's an overall solid look. If I was going to give this a tier, which I'm not going to for these because I don't have, like, obviously the full look at everything, I would probably say this is a strong high B, low A, and I think that would be pretty solid. I think it's a decent core. It's one I probably would add to a roster if I was still accepting cores right now. Now, this is a cool core. Chris Cryptic. I really like the look of this core. It works really, really well. I love the gold attire. I like both attires, but the gold attire really, really stands out. This is a fantastic core from what I can see. The tattoos blend well. The body type works with the overall look. I really like the hair and the beard kind of look as well. And I like the sort of the Western-ish look. I think that's Texas right there, which, you know what, shows you they're from Texas. Really, really good core. If I was going to give this a tier, this would probably be an S tier, to be completely honest. We then have Alice Green, who is a fine core, right? Like, solid design, but nothing really standout-ish. Uses one of the default face templates. The gear is fine. It's nothing standout-ish. This would probably be like a high C tier, low B. Nothing too crazy, but also nothing too bad either way, to be honest. So we've got quite a few cores from one creator that I'm probably going to be able to just quickly go through in the entirety of this. So we start off with Skulldog. We got a Bullet Club look here. I actually really like the attire, and I do think that there's been a little bit morphing to the face. You know what, I would usually say I'm not the biggest fan of there being the Bullet Club logo and all of that on there, but at least you're making it your own and you're not just having it on there for the sake of having it on there. You're actually running a Bullet Club faction. So I'm also going to quickly go ahead and give grades to each other core, but I think maybe the tats could be lowered a little bit opacity wise. Apart from that, it's a pretty decent core. I would say a B tier. Next up, we have Jonial. I think Jonial's fine. Very similar look to Skulldog, but it's an alright look. I'd probably say slightly lower B tier, but still a solid design nonetheless. Then we have Jade. I would say that the tats need to have their opacity lowered. I think it's a solid look. Nothing too standoutish. I would also say probably a B tier. So Yuri's design is okay. It's nothing too crazy. I'm not a fan of the fact that the logos look more stretched on her than any other character. And again, the tattoos probably could do with a little bit of blending. Maybe that's just because they're a little further away than usual. I'm not sure. Probably the weakest offering of the lot so far. I would probably put her in a high C tier. We then have Bella Sullivan. I think this is an alright design. It's a little bit all over the place, a little bit garish, but I get the attempt here. I'm not a fan of the Bullet Club logos on the side of the attire, but that's just a me preference personally. I think you've got some good elements there, but you might need to refine it just a little bit. I would probably say a low B tier. I would love to know what this core's name is, but unfortunately it has been censored by 2K, but it's the final one of the Bullet Club group. Again, I think the tattoos, this one's not too bad blending wise. The attire is a little bit more on the basic side. I think the face looks nice, but everything else isn't super standoutish to me. I think this would probably be a high C tier. And we'll wrap up the rapid fires with Matt Williams, who looks really sick, I can't lie. This is a really unique look. I'm not the biggest fan of the black and the white, but it really works. One thing I would have done would have been, because you're going for like a horror look, because of it, if you look there, it says Matty Horror 25. I would have gone and just made the skin grey and gone for a black and white look, you know, like a timeless Tony Storm-esque thing. Make yourself look like a really old school horror villain. I think that would have really worked in your favour. But I think it's a unique design, and for uniqueness, that's got to give you points. I would say a high B tier. So that has been the core review. Thank you all for tuning in, and hey, if you haven't already uploaded your cores, go ahead and submit them to the hashtag breadstick, and I will try and get round to it as soon as humanly possible. There's really been way more submissions than I possibly thought was even possible, but thank you all for tuning in. If you want to see more core reviews, they'll be right here, and apparently YouTube really thinks you'll like this, so maybe it's worth checking that out instead. But yeah, see ya!